is kind of fun for me when it actually works out. I don't know what you guys that are watching, but life happens in trying to get things to happen on the time and frequency that we have is such a challenge. And in some respects, that's why I think ServiceNow is so cool, because it ends up being this workflow pattern, a workflow system, a trusted organization or system that we can go to say, what things do I need to work on and where are they and how do I get this to move faster? One of the things that I hear from customers many times is, am I getting the value? Am I getting the outcome? Am I getting the results that I want from ServiceNow and the investment that I put into it? Today, I get to be joined by two friends to dig in deeper to that, where we're going to really talk about how to get more value from your ServiceNow investment using the ServiceNow product called Source2Pay. And so with that, let me do some introductions with Ryan Williams and Tom Urban. Ryan, you want to say hi first?
Hi everyone, I'm Ryan Williams, CPO at Northcraft Analytics, and you'll see a little bit, as we walk through this journey of what Northcraft plays a part in the Source2Pay journey here that we're working on. So looking forward to having a great discussion.
Cool. Thank you, Ryan. Tom?
Tom Urban, I'm VP of Business Outcomes at Outcome Driven Solutions. So Source2Pay is one of those things I get really excited about. People talk about, well, isn't that just ServiceNow for procurement? And it's like, it's been this thing that ServiceNow has been working on for a while, and it took a while to get it right, but I think they really got it right. And so we're so excited to be here today to talk with Troy. And it's really this trifecta that you're seeing here. It's ServiceNow, it's Northcraft, and it's ODS coming together and really unlocking a ton of value from the platform.
I think back to the times that we've met and we've talked. There's so many things that get you excited, and I think the key part about it is that you found a way to take all this cool data and things we have in ServiceNow. And the way I talk about it is you actually know how to speak finance,
right?
And I've used different languages. I think every time we've talked about it, it's like, all right, if ServiceNow's financial model is Portuguese, understand how to speak Spanish and understand that they are indeed different. So thank you for that and bringing that financial basis and the financial language, to this conversation.
Glad to be here.
All right, you've got a deck. Let me pull that up. And really, what we've uncovered and what you found is a way to unlock the next level of value from ServiceNow. Tell me about how you got to this title and this focus.
Well, so if you think about IT and their challenges, right? They're always supposed to do more with less, and they really are a service provider within the org, but they're also, a consumer of money and a deliverer of service. And
right.
If they do it right, they're providing a ton of value. And I think where a lot of IT teams have been challenged is they know they're doing a good job, but how do they prove to the CIO, CFO, board of directors that they're doing a good job? And so you really have to think about ROI. And you can't do ROI unless you understand the R and you understand the I. And right. I think that's what Source2Pay has really opened up, is creating that connection between IT and finance. So should we go to the next slide? We'll get into that.
We should indeed.
So when we come into a ServiceNow environment, a lot of times, this is what we'll see. We'll see people, and, there's a ton that the platform does. So my apologies that I've simplified it, but, somebody will have ITSM at the front end, and, customers will go in there and they'll do service portal, right? And they'll say, hey, I need this, right? Or this is broken, I need you to fix it. And then that gets approved or doesn't get approved. If it gets approved, well, maybe I need to go buy it. So I need to flip that over to procurement. And that right there, I've created two islands. Okay, now I bought it and I have to pay for it. Now I have a third island. And then what I have to do is now I have to go discover it. You can keep going. I'm good either way. And then ITOM really helps you optimize what you're doing out there. And I know some people are going to say, wait a minute, you've left out a lot of islands. And I have, right? I've got to receive it. I've got to deploy it. I've got to repair it. There's a lot that goes on, but the challenge for IT has always been when they go to sit down with finance to say, this is where I'm investing the money. their numbers are out of sync. And who wins in those debates? Finance always wins because their numbers are current, accurate. And what Source2Pay does is gets them an equal seat at the table, because now we have a shared perspective on how we look at things and how we talk about things. So let's go to the next slide, and because it doesn't end there, it keeps going. So now I've got a shared perspective. What else can I do with that? And that's why I say, but wait, there's more.
Let me go back a little bit. And again, animation, it's not. Here we go. Okay. So one of the things I see here is really the question of why ServiceNow. I've been around this ecosystem for a long time. I'm passionate about it. I work for the company now, but as I look at many different orgs and I see these islands, I think we've heard of other systems and other solutions trying to say, yeah, we can solve this. But I think the three of us have kind of said, yeah, but really? Yeah, I don't know that they can. And I think ServiceNow stands out in a way that it's not just another product. It's not just ServiceNow for procurement. That Source2Pay does bring some unique capabilities. But I like to hear you guys both jump in and say, why is ServiceNow at the center of this conversation and unlocking this value that I think a lot of our customers have been trying to do for a long time?
So do you want me to go first, Ryan, or do you want to go?
Go for it, Tom.
So the cool thing about ServiceNow is it's a platform first, right? So all of your information is integrated first, and then there's applications on top of it. The way a lot of other companies, this is the age-old ServiceNow story, right? A lot of other people have a bunch of apps that they try to slam together to get something. And what you end up with is, this least common denominator solution of gluing these things together. So ServiceNow has really come at it from that other direction and bringing this together. And the other piece we kind of hinted at is, Source2Pay on ServiceNow is this is for IT to really run more like a business. And that's kind of what the next slide talks about as well. It's like, I have customers who are going to ask for things and I have to deliver a service to them, but I have to be a good steward with the money. And it's connecting all those dots. And I think a lot of the other Source2Pay solutions out there, what they're probably good at is I'm a manufacturer and I've got 10 bajillion parts that I need to track and pay for. And so if I'm this big manufacturer that I'm building a 747, right? And I have all these different parts, that doesn't really help IT much, right? This is really, if you're IT and you're trying to run IT like a business, this is the missing link. In fact, I even put a video out there when, this is the missing link that has been out there. And ServiceNow has come at this a couple of times, right? This isn't their 1.0 solution. Mm-hmm. It's a big problem, and it needed ServiceNow. There's other, ServiceNow wannabes. They can't get there from here, right? You really need the robustness of ServiceNow, and then you needed the robustness of the way they built Source2Pay on top of that. Ryan, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, just from my background, being a leader at a very large organization in the past, right? Same challenge, right? And you go back to the general pieces of ServiceNow overall and being able to, workflow between multiple different, areas of an organization, right? Including that payment, that Source2Pay, and having all those pieces and components connected together. I've used several different big software firms as well that, didn't do it as well as ServiceNow did, right? And so this solution and what we're going to kind of unravel here, being able to make it easier to understand where you're going from a Source2Pay type of solution, I think is going to be very valuable for a lot of you. So we're excited to move on and present that.
And the other thing I think you bring, Ryan, with the perspective is being able to do enterprise BI that scales. I love ServiceNow, and it does workflow across the enterprise. But there's data that either there's just sheer volume, and let's talk petabytes or bigger, or just the speed of data is so fast that oftentimes data does not or should not reside on ServiceNow. That doesn't mean the workflow shouldn't, right? It's like we should be that workflow engine. But I'm not sure if there's anything from your seat, just based on kind of that perspective of me that many of our organizations have just a deluge of data. Not all of it in the source to pay, but I think it affects how do I know which metrics matter, right?
Right. Yep. I mean, we run across a lot of customers, a lot of ServiceNow customers where we're stitching together data, monitoring data that's outside of ServiceNow, other data sets that just can't exist in ServiceNow exclusively, or ServiceNow data that maybe needs to go broader than what, can be shown off inside of the ServiceNow platform, natively, I would say, right? There's ways to bring it back in, but all sub-second response speeds with our different customers that we've done, and we do some fairly large data sets like Troy was talking about. So a very big challenge. Many customers have run across, many customers have failed at, and we've gotten involved in. So again, with this solution being more focused, but there is a lot of ways we can pull in disparate data outside of this as well to enrich this if needed in a use case.
Yeah, cool. And I know we'll see some more later, but
Where to come?
when I see this picture of the islands, it brings that to mind. Is that right now all of these are ServiceNow related, and it comes in nicely into the Northcraft system. But there could be other things that we're pulling as well to really augment it or expand on it. So
Absolutely.
let's continue. All right, but wait, there's more. Let's hear it, Tom.
So, I mean, I think where most people, and this is like good, better, best almost as this builds out. And so I think a lot of people look at source to pay as, oh, I'm going to connect the front end to the back end, right? And that's ITSM to ITSM. And it does that. Right. But to me, that's the shallow end of the pool, because when you start to think about running IT like a business, let's go to the next one. Right. I need to know what stuff costs. Right.
Mm-hmm.
What are my in-year costs? And what blindsides a lot of people is they'll sign up for something and then they forget to budget for it because they have out-year costs. And all of a sudden now they're struggling over their budget. So if we go to the next one, this is one of the most awesome Easter eggs inside of ServiceNow is IT budgeting. Like if you're doing SPM and you're trying to manage your projects and everything, people will put something together and trying to understand their actuals. Well, we talked about this earlier. I think you said what, Portuguese and Spanish. I sometimes say Vulcan and Klingon because you're trying to take.
You need the animosity as well.
Yeah. But people will say, oh, we have a budgeting solution.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we'll say, oh, it's SAP or it's Oracle. That's a finance budgeting solution. Again, ServiceNow's homies is IT, right? And IT budgets differently. They budget projects, demands, services. That's how they look at the world. And then they have to convert that into CapEx and OpEx. And then you have to track it over time. What a nightmare. But guess what? ServiceNow actually does it really well. And once I have all that in there, I've got my in-year, out-year budget, forecast, actuals, billing becomes pretty easy as well. And you and I talked about this. Billing is different than chargeback. And so if anybody wants to kind of understand the difference, because chargeback is really hard, but billing is relatively, I won't say easy, but I'll say it's simple.
Right.
And
this
so
unlocks both of those, right? So if we look at the IT billing, it's really can be both.
It can be both. And source to pay is that foundation that you get to build all this stuff on. Right. So you get to build up, you think about continuous improvement, plan, act, assess. Well, that act piece, that's source to pay, and making sure that that's solid so that as you plan something, you know that you can implement it and then you can assess, hey, I did a pretty good job.
Yeah. I know we've said it, and I know we've heard many other customers talk about their IT budgeting process as the spreadsheet circus. It's very, very common, but it over and over again as we've talked about this, that is one of the ways that we provide such consistency, because you have that traceability. ServiceNow becomes that system of record, that trusted source, and now you can do that budget and planning that you can also trace back and do your actuals against.
Exactly. Yeah, it's platform first, right? That's where all this comes from.
All right, so let's go to this next one. New levels of IT financial metrics.
Right. So as people look at source to pay, it's really those four boxes, right? It's sourcing operations, it's procurement operations, supplier lifecycle operations, and accounts payable operations. So we're starting to get into, hey, I've got a request that's been approved. I got to go, I better go get this stuff, right? And I got to get it from vendors that I've got to make sure I'm getting the best deal, and I'm, optimizing my contracts and everything, and then making sure that I'm only paying for stuff that I actually receive. And putting that financial layer on there is what unlocks, like, what we came up with for the first 8. There's a lot more, but this is like the low hanging fruit. So if you can bring up those 8 blocks.
You're going to say we need the 8.
Right. We need the 8.
Yeah.
So this is where we can actually go in and understand the financial metrics around each one of these blocks. And as we looked at this and we said, okay, we're going to have a target for this, and we got to measure progress against this. And again, we talked about a lot of these variables: budget, forecast, actuals, committed spend, all these pieces and parts. What did I think I was going to do? What did I actually do? That's when we pivoted to Northcraft and said, we don't think anybody can do this. And Northcraft said, we can do this without breaking a sweat. And we're like, okay, prove it. Right? And so you look at those 8 dials on the bottom, those are the 8 boxes that were on the previous slide. And what we're able to do now is actually help people measure their progress. So when we talk about unlocking the next value, we hear that from ServiceNow customers. In their gut, they know they're getting value, but how do they demonstrate it? And that's what this does. This is like, we can use Northcraft to demonstrate it. And we can put those in these 8 categories. And you'll see on the left there in the bottom part, right? Actuals versus your target. So let's put a stake in the sand and say, this is how much value we want from, and when it says contract management there, it's the contract financials management. So it's optimizing contracts or category management or any of these pieces. Let's figure out what we're going to do. And then let's measure our actual results against that target. So year to date is just, so let's say my target was $1 million. Right. And I think $1 million is kind of the minimum for a lot of ServiceNow customers. When you turn this on and the optimization you can get, I think people aren't even trying when it's $1 million. But actual versus target is, let's say it's $1 million and I'm in June, so I should be at about 500K. Year to date, I'm halfway through the year and I've hit about half of my number. So 500K over 500K, my year to date, I'm at 100%. Right. And then here's a slick thing that Northcraft can do. My EAC is my estimate at complete. So I can take what I've been doing and project it out to the end and say, if I stay on this path, here's where I'm going to finish. Mm-hmm. And so I can look at these different dials and say, wow, I'm doing really great in this area, but maybe not so good in this area. And, let me evaluate that and see, maybe I want to double down on the area I'm doing really well and I'll work on that next area next year, or maybe I need to somehow prop that up.
Right.
But what gets cool with these metrics is that next one, days to break even, because that's what we really want to do.
I was going to go there.
Oh, go ahead, Ryan.
No, I was gonna have you kind of touch on that days to break even, because that's a very powerful story in itself. Right.
And that's the one where we take your all-in cost to get this thing stood up, and then how quickly can we get your money back? So that's going to be a much lower number, right? But and then we're just going to try and get there as quickly as possible. We had one customer where the days to break even was 0. And what happened there, it was crazy. So we found when they were doing 2-way match, and they got an invoice for something and they paid for it. And then when they hooked in the 3-way match, which was show me that I received this, nobody could show that they received it. So they went back to the vendor, and it was $176,000. Like, it wasn't, like a box of pencils. Mm-hmm. It was a lot of equipment, $176,000, days to break. And that was before we went live. So our days to break even was 0 before we even started.
And to me, I want to spend some time on that, and that's why I dropped the share so we could all talk about it. Is when we say total into this, many of the people watching this, there's probably a handful that are like, service what? Most of the people are likely understand ServiceNow. They've got it there. Often they've been looking at ways to get more value from it, whether they're a partner or a customer or part of ServiceNow itself. One of the things that I know we talked about before we got into this is when we say you're all in, what does a customer need to have inside of ServiceNow for us to turn this on? And by turning it on, it's right. We're buying Source2Pay as a product from ServiceNow. we're doing some implementation, working with Tom, your organization. We could contract that through ServiceNow or go direct, depending on how things work. And then Northcraft, likewise, we can bring that in through ServiceNow, or if you're working directly with Northcraft, having those pieces in there. But how much does an organization really need to have inside of ServiceNow to start seeing this value, to see that break-even point, which is not going to be way out on the radar, but is going to be much closer on their radar for them? What pieces do they need?
Well, obviously, I don't want to sound cliche, but the more you have, the more you'll save. But you know, having that front end, right, where I need to request stuff, right? I need to get stuff. Having some level of ITAM would be good. And really what we're focused on is that middle part between the request and actually doing the back end management. But I would say at a bare minimum, that's it. But the tentacles for Source2Pay can go into like field service management. It can go into clinical device management. It can go into those different areas within, you know, that ServiceNow is expanding into, and just help you get that visibility. I mean, if Northcraft does anything great, it's visibility. And your point at the beginning was, where do I focus? Like, there's a lot of stuff I could focus on. What's on fire and what can I ignore? And that's really where it helps you. And the nice thing about having it in ServiceNow and having it in Source2Pay is you're not going to find $1 million in one area. You're going to find nickels and dimes all over the place. Right. And they're going to
there's lots of couches to go and shake and find that change. What I'm hearing you say, right?
Exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's kind of the point. Throwing bodies at it is kind of thankless, because, you know, your body may go look and they're like, oh, there's nothing there. And so they stop looking. And then all of a sudden something showed up there and they didn't have a trigger to say, hey, we just lost out on $176,000. Right. Because we weren't looking for it. And so that's the nice thing of bringing this together. But I would say ITSM and ITAM are at the bare minimum. You don't even have to have, like, if you're thinking of doing a platform refresh or any of that, the one thing I would recommend is incorporate Source2Pay in that strategy, because what happens is people will say, I just did a CMDB best practice, but they didn't factor in the IT financials. They were factoring in, you know, functionality or, you know, some other piece. And then we have to go in there and they're like, wait, I just finished. And it's like, but you didn't do the financial enablement so that we can light all this stuff up.
Right. I like
that.
Another
bonus, when you get audited, right? When somebody says, hey, you bought all this stuff, where is it? You can say, here's a portal. You go look it up. I know where everything is because I've connected all the dots.
I like that.
Yeah.
Right. From a Northcraft standpoint, any other things that they'd need in place to start, you know, turning on some of your capabilities, not only for this, but I think some of your, you know, we've talked in the past, the CIO dashboard and a healthy afternoon, right? There's a number of things that when you guys show up with that enterprise BI that can scale, but are there other things that you'd like to see in place to get started?
Yeah, I mean, with this, it's just needing ServiceNow, right? We'll connect any data pieces inside of ServiceNow. Obviously, if you have more complex solutions where not everything's residing inside of ServiceNow that we need to connect into, that we're gonna, you know, go beyond, right? It's understanding that journey you're on and what we need to go connect into to tell that story. So, but from a basic standpoint, I mean, if you got ServiceNow and you're living within that, that's a great space for us to start.
Uh-oh. Can you hear him?
No.
Now, check. Is that thing working?
Yeah.
All right. So now let's transition a little bit. We've talked about some of the things that people need. We've talked about this islands and how we bring it together and how it can really show value quickly with, you know, several different views. If someone is watching this and either has a friend they want to ask for, you know, how best to get engaged. I know you've got some really cool tools. I want to walk through that. And as we go through and show some of the tools you put together, start talking about, you know, how best for them to reach us, either one of the three of us, and what that conversation would look like. Because I love these slides that you talk through of really how you're doing some simple questions, to help really frame is this going to be a worthwhile thing for an organization to jump into? And so let me pull up that share, but as you describe these slides, be thinking about, really what that engagement would look like for someone to say, yeah, I want to hear more.
Yeah, that's a great question, because nobody's sitting around thinking, hey, I've got tons of resources. What project should I do next? Right? Everybody's busy.
Yeah,
And what is the smartest thing for me to do next?
Mm-hmm.
And how do I justify those dashboards are neat, but how do I justify getting those dashboards going? And so what we did for people was, because we're focused on metrics, let's sit down with you and say, what could your target be, or what should your target be? And so these are those same 8 metrics you see there on the right side.
It's like crazy talk, Tom, to say that we're going to use analytics to make data-driven decisions. I mean,
well, this is the other thing that I give Ryan like a nice warm hug, is that people talk about value they're going to unlock with ServiceNow, and then they don't co-pilot their progress to success. And that's one of the things. It's like, let's set a reasonable target. And that's the other thing, is we've done this for people and they're like, whoa, I don't want to show my boss this number. Can we show him a smaller number? And it's like, sure, we can show him a smaller number, because, if you say, hey, I'm going to save the company $5 million, and you save them $5 million, nobody cares. But if you say, I'm going to save the company $3 million, and you save them $5 million, all of a sudden you're a hero. And if you say, I'm going to save them 10 million, and you save them 8 million, you're a villain. So it's, we want to create heroes out there from people doing this. And, so everybody's walking around patting them on the back. So this looks interesting, but let's go to the next slide, because it's not like we're going to ask you 47 questions and lock you into a room for 8 days to get these metrics put together. You're going to have a lot of this information off the top of your head, right? How many orders are you doing per month? How long does it take you to do an order? And if you don't have some of these things, it's kind of like, maybe you should. But these don't have to be perfect, right? These can be, what's your average labor rate? Throw a dart, because we're still going to come up with some really good numbers that you're probably going to actually want to tweak down a little bit, because we're coming at this from 8 different ways. So when our team says we're going to save you a couple $1 million, guess what? Behind the scenes, we're targeting like double or triple that, because we want you guys, we want you to be successful, and we want you to say, wow, best decision I ever made was bringing these guys in and doing this.
One of the things that, again, we've talked about several times, that this is not a set of numbers that we look at and we try and assess and then put it on the shelf and walk away from it. This is numbers that then as we enable it, that's the bar we're tracking to, that we're seeing those gauges on of how we're hitting it or not. And to me, that's one of the things I like best about this is it's a model that we're putting in place to track continually in real time as we have that data.
Exactly. And there's guys much smarter than me behind the scenes working on this stuff. So like they'll say, well, what should it be? Right. And we've got guys with 6 Sigma and other things, and they'll say, hey, based on this 8-letter acronym or 6-letter acronym, they say it should be this. Let's punch that in and kind of get you some numbers so we can keep moving forward.
Yeah, indeed. That's awesome. So for each of those 8 dials, you guys have worked through a handful of really pretty high level scoping questions. I zoomed in on some of those so we could see them. And the idea is, if someone's interested, reach out to one of the 3 of us. We'll set up a meeting, walk together, and say, does this make sense for your organization or not? And again, let's swag that right. Let's take a conservative guess at each one of those. But as we've looked at it, very, very likely the value that we can get out of ServiceNow with Source2Pay inside your system, looking at what you have in asset, looking what you have already set up in requests for people to say, hey, I need a new laptop, I need a new server, I need a different database. How do I estimate that and start really tracking those costs and running IT like a business?
Right. And we do all that for free, like setting up your estimators and everything, because we really want people to be successful. So let's figure out what success looks like. And then you decide, hey, this looks enough like success that I want to move forward.
Right. if someone's watching, what areas do you guys cover? You know, within ServiceNow, I cover manufacturing for the West, but I love being a connector. So if anyone wants to find out how to reach into ServiceNow and ask for some help, don't hesitate to reach out and ask me. But for Brian and Tom, you know, give those that are watching or run across this, you know, which areas do you cover, and when should they reach out to you, or when would they expect to, you know, be connected with someone else too?
Well, I'll go first. If you have ServiceNow, right, that's what I care about. So, and ideally you have those things, like you have ITSM already going.
Mm-hmm.
That's really it. And you're just looking for ways, or somebody, maybe your boss's boss is looking for ways to say, how do I turn ServiceNow into a cash machine? And this is really the way to do it. So when the CFO knocks on the CIO's door and says, hey, why are you doing this with ServiceNow? He's like, check this out.
Yeah. How many customers have we run into through the years where the IT department is using ServiceNow, they're experiencing the value from it. So experientially, we know its value. Right. But to be able to turn around and communicate that's where I think the language analogy, you know, runs in my head. I'm trying desperately to learn Spanish on Duolingo. I don't know. I still speak English, and I don't even do that very well sometimes. To me, this is really helping equip those teams that are like, but ServiceNow is value.
Right.
How do I communicate it in terms that the other part of the business will understand it?
Exactly.
And
Brian, what do you do?
Yeah, from a Northcraft standpoint, I mean, obviously this is a great piece that we're a part of, but you know, Northcraft's story, right, is you can go much deeper, right? Whether it be in that financial sector and connecting. I talked a little bit about the disparate data, the things that might be outside of this that you'd want to pull in to tell that story, or going beyond it, right? So Northcraft, you know, we'll dive in and do a much broader reporting structure across all of different ServiceNows, you know, different product lines, along with product lines from other software, you know, companies, and meshing them all together to tell a story in a single pane of glass. So from that CIO's perspective or beyond, right, though, that, you know, Northcraft doesn't stop with just this piece. It goes much broader. So this is a great space to start, right? And you know, we'd love to have this be the launching pad for that, but there are a lot of other areas that we can help unlock beyond this from an analytics standpoint.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Any other closing comments as you think through what we talked about today, getting more value out of ServiceNow, seeing those, the just stream of apparently disconnected islands of activity and different information, and seeing how Source2Pay can pull it together, some of the light bulbs that have gone on as you've worked with customers to help them really see value. What's kind of your parting words for us today?
Well, I would say Source2Pay is a foundation for some of those other areas that I talked about, because when people kind of say, wow, that was, it's tough to say the word easy, but it was kind of like, you know, that was simple. Yeah. And they start to come up with different ways to do things. Could I do this? Could I do this? And so their imagination starts to take off because they didn't even think it was possible before, right? And so that's what's really cool is, you know, we talked about, you know, the IT billing and the piece. We didn't even touch on that, but that's another cool piece that we could get into. That if people are looking at that, you're trying to get that rock of IT out of overhead and out into the BUs. You need to be able to defend that rock, and Source2Pay helps you do that.
Very cool. Ryan, last thoughts?
I always give the story of like a kid in a candy store, right? And obviously we shared, you know, 8 metrics, you know, that kind of told the story back. That's a great starting point, right? But kid in a candy store, where we can go with this to help unlock, you know, Source2Pay data or even financials broader or beyond, right? With ServiceNow. I mean, let's have a conversation about it. I mean, there's just so many areas that we can all work together on and unlock, and so let's start somewhere and you know, see where it brings us.
Yeah, cool. Well, again, thank you guys for joining. Thanks for another Workflow Wednesday. I appreciate the time and the possibility of doing this, and I look forward to hearing back. Post a comment in the post below, reach out to Tom or Ryan and I. Let us hear your thoughts. And if you've got an idea for me for another Workflow Wednesday, or you have guts like Tom and Ryan to join me on it, don't hesitate to reach out. I love sharing ideas of what's happening right now in the business world and what's happening right now on the ServiceNow platform. So with that, you have a good rest of the day, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye. And